stage that leads down to a cellar, and the waiter will take it cold. And nothing has ever changed, it's not for the better. And the curry on swimming choke, the band are watching another fight. The heroin pushes a clear at night, and the naked dancers all dressed in white. I tell you, it's out there. Miss November, she's a playmate. Rock stars of the 80s, directors who are irate, models and comedians, actors and comedians, all the sort of people who carry something lethal. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey, Gypsies is alright. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey, Gypsies is alright. Poker is played every night. The stakes are beyond belief. It's nice just to watch them play. It's lit by candlelight, the one of a full-time thief. Then it's time to face the breaking day. The curtain's down on another show. Now insomniacs will just have to go. The mood will be tonight's staged roll. I tell you, it's out there. Miss November, she's a playmate. Rock stars of the 80s, directors who are irate, models and comedians, actors and chameleons, all the sort of people who carry something lethal. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey, Gypsies is alright. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey, Gypsies is alright. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey, Gypsies is alright. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey, Gypsies is alright. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey, Gypsies is alright. Gypsies is a gas singing, hey.
You get the idea. The song's name is Trixie 2. Now, there's a Trixie 1, which is very slow, and I didn't want to put it on. How you doing, everybody? Happy Friday evening. It's almost Saturday. A couple of minutes to go. Hey, Ira. Now, it's been busy for Squeeze 2026. Now, what's going on with Squeeze? The band from the 70s, the 80s, a Trixie tour. Well, when it comes to storytelling, okay, very few pop groups, I don't care who you are, have done it as well as Squeeze. I always thought they were a little too clever for American audiences. And in fact, in 1984, I believe Difford and Tilbrook were on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine being lauded as the next Lennon-McCartney. Well, that didn't bode too well. Kind of like when you are on ESPN's cover, their pick for the World Series, you never win it. But even with the group's mainstays, which are Difford and Tilbrook, there's been lineup changes. It would be hard to invent a plot twist if you wrote a book to put together what's going on here. Now, this is their first album in 8 years, but it's the first one they ever wrote. Before all their classics, Goodbye Girl, Tempted, Another Nail in the Heart, all those, before the 2008 Ivan Novello Award for Outstanding Contribution to British Music, the world tours, the festivals, and all that, there was Trixies. Yep. Now, they announced a few weeks ago that Difford, when he was a teenager, 19, and Tilbrook was 16, At the very start of their songwriting partnership, they come up with this concept album. And what do they come up with? This, a rock opera. The vernacular of Damon Runyon. That's how Difford was thinking at that time. A collection of stories set in a fictional nightclub. And the nightclub is called Trixie's. Now, the only problem with these songs, which haven't been released yet, March 6th, the album comes out, CD, streaming, whatever. They allowed you to have two. There's a crime scene, the place we call Mars, Don't Go Out in the Dark, riotous comedy stuff, Why Don't You, You Get the Feeling. These are songs that supposedly, I haven't heard them, are about Trixie's. So they fully committed themselves to rewriting these songs. But they didn't have enough musical experience back then to get them off the ground. At that time, they couldn't get signed. They didn't have gigs. So from the moment they met, Chris put an advertisement or an advertisement, which is the right way, in a candy shop window saying they needed a guitarist, a band had a record label deal and all that. Well, there was no band, there was no record label deal. There was Chris Difford. And very early on in the partnership, they realized that Difford's words were probably stronger than Tilbrook's, but Tilbrook's melodies were better. So they forgot about these songs, trying to do some work. And then what happened was they came across these cassette tapes of all these old songs. Now, they have a tour date and date scheduled, nothing in the US yet. They're going to be joined by Owen Biddle, who's a bass guitarist, Melvin Duffy, pedal steel guitar, Steve Smith, percussion, who's been touring the last few years with them, Stephen Lodge, great keyboard player, Simon Hansen, drums, he's been with them. He was with Glenn when he was solo before Squeeze got back together around 2007, and Danica Dora backing vocals. Now, 50 years on, after rediscovering this original cassette tape, the problem no longer exists where they don't know what to do with it. Their live shows are legendary, even though they haven't quite hit the pinnacle that many thought they'd hit in the 80s. So what better way to mark 50 years of Squeeze than to complete the circle with stuff that they had written before they ever were known. And going back and listening to them, it astounded them how naive they were. And it's like an open volley of songs, one after another after another. So it was a catalyst for their later day songwriting. And they revisited them. Now they're also working on another album or CD or streaming, whatever you subscribe to, that's going to come out a couple of months after March 6th release of Trixie's. Now, there's a weird sort of maturity in these songs that I hear that song for a 19-year-old lyricist and a 16-year-old melody maker. Very, very mature, that song. And you can point to Paul McCartney or the Kinks, the Who, but it definitely is something that is going to be worth listening to. So, who are Squeeze? Well, good question, and I'm here to tell you. They're an English rock band. They came to prominence in the UK during the new wave period of the late 70s. In fact, Miles Copeland was their producer, Stuart Copeland's brother. And they also knew Elvis Costello and that whole British contingent. And they continued recording into the 80s, 90s, 2010s. They had UK top singles, Cool for Cats, Up the Junction, Labeled with Love, top 10 chart hits. They weren't as commercially successful in the United States. They had their first American hits with Tempted, Black Coffee, and Bed and Hourglass, which was kind of the second British invasion in the 80s with the Duran Durans and Tears for Fears and Thompson Twins and all that. Now, the vast majority of stuff was written by Difford and Tilbrook, the guitarists and vocalists in the band. And they were hailed, as I said, the heirs to the Lennon-McCartney throne. They're from Deptford. They formed in 74. They broke up in 82. They reformed in 85, disbanded again in 99. And they were a launch pad for keyboard player Jools Holland, who now has one of the most highly regarded shows in London, Jools Holland's Hootenanny. It's a music show that's been running for a while. And Paul Carrick, who was actually there for the song Tempted, late of Ace, the song How Long, remember? How long has this been going on? Well, they reunited in the U.S. and throughout the United Kingdom in 2007, I believe. They issued Spot the Difference in 2010, an album of newly recorded versions of older stuff so they could get the copyright and make some money on it. And that was their first new album since 98. Cradle to the Grave was released in 2015. That was followed by an album, The Knowledge, in 2017. Cradle to the Grave was the soundtrack to a British sitcom, Cradle to the Grave, which was actually very good. It ran one season, and I happened to watch it. Now, from 74 to 82, their first incarnation, the founding members, Difford and Tilbrook, Difford said, I read his book, which was excellent, that he stole 50 pence from his mother in 1973 from the purse to put a card in a local sweet shop window to advertise for a guitarist. He wasn't in a band, so he had quite a bit of imagination even back then. Tilbrook was the only one who responded. So Difford and Tilbrook began writing songs and soon added Jools Holland, a wonderful keyboard player. And in fact, many people don't know this. He was the interviewer for the first part of the anthology series. You only see the Beatles talking. Well, he was the interviewer. Paul Gunn was the original drummer, and they formed an actual band. And they went under several names. Captain Trundlow's Sky Company, Skyco. And then they named the band Squeeze as a tribute to the Velvet Underground's 1973 album Squeeze. Gilson Lavis, who recently passed, and I did a good special on him if you go back about a month and watch my tribute. Great drummer, and Harry Kakuli joined on bass in 1975. Now, their early career was spent around Deptford in southeast London. Okay, not the greatest of areas. They were part of a lively local music scene that had a lot of bands, alternative TV, Dire Straits. Now, they originally were signed by Miles Copeland for BTM Records. The label went under in 1976. So their early singles and the debut EP, which was in 77, Packet of Three, was released by Deptford Fun City label. Their first EP was self-titled, produced by John Cale for A&M Records. Cale had been a member of the Velvet Underground, and Squeeze took the name from the album. And Take Me I'm Yours and Bang Bang were produced by the band themselves. The label found that the recordings were very uncommercial, Cale's recordings. In 80, they made Argy Bargy, which was their third album, became a UK hit. They pulled through with Another Nail in the Heart. It was number 56 in Canada. Pulling Muscles from a Shell, which got airplay in US. And the video was shown on a lot of independent video music shows in the US. In 81, they came out with East Side Story. That was produced by Elvis Costello and Roger Beckrian. And it featured Carrick's lead on the radio hit Tempted. Originally, Difford wrote it for Tilbrook. Tilbrook had a sore throat. When they heard Carrick do it, Carrick did it. Now, during East Side Story, Carrick left and was replaced by Don Snow. They've had a bunch of keyboard players. And they had a number 5 hit now, Labeled with Love, kind of a countryish kind of ballad. It reached number 4 in the UK, number 2 in Ireland, actually. Then they recorded Sweets from a Stranger in 1982. Negative reviews. I thought it was pretty interesting, but the stress of touring, conflicts between the band members led to them breaking up. Just a year after they released Annie Get Your Gun, which was pretty well thought of. Now, in 83 and 84, Difford and Tilbrook continued to work together. They released the self-titled album, Difford and Tilbrook, in 1984. Not officially a Squeeze album, but many consider it like the lost Squeeze LP because Difford and Tilbrook were the only ones really constantly in the band, right? And a couple of those songs have been on Squeeze compilations. So I guess it's Squeeze. Now, from 85 to 89, they reformed to play a one-night charity gig in 85. All 5 members from the 1980 Argy Bargy period, Difford, Tilbrook, Holland Lavis, and John Bentley, who was a bass player. The performance was such a success and they found they missed each other that they agreed to resume recording and touring as Squeeze. But they were searching for a different sound. So they replaced Bentley with bassist Keith Wilkinson, who was a really good bassist. He had played with them during the Difford and Tilbrook sessions in 84 when they went solo for that year or two. And the lineup came out with 1985's Cozy Fan Tutti Frutti, which wasn't that well produced, but it was a start. A couple of years later, their Hourglass album was much better. And that was Babylon and On, the name of that album. Now, there were a lot of complex double-track keyboard parts that couldn't be played live. So Jules' his brother Christopher, at 17, started touring with them in 1985 because a lot of those songs had some complex stuff. And Christopher also had played Hammond organ on the 4th single off that album, Heartbreaking World, which was very nice, sung by Jules Holland. But his tenure was short-lived. He was pursuing a solo career, went to IRS Records, and that was it. So he was replaced by Andy Metcalf from the Soft Boys and the Egyptians, English bands. But he was a bassist in those groups. But he played keyboard, multi-instrumentalist. His tenure as the 6th member lasted until 88. So in and out, in and out. Now, the sextet recorded in 1987, Babble On and On. Successful both sides of the Atlantic, and their only top 40 U.S. hit, Hourglass, and 853 5937, which is a good song. Metcalf left in 88, and you got Difford, Tilbrook, Holland, and Wilkinson. And Lavis, the drummer. They do 1989's Frank album, which was not commercially very successful, but I thought it was actually a very good album. No chart singles from that album. So they were dropped from their longtime label A&M. It goes on and on. From 2000 to 2006, Difford and Tilbrook collaborated on one song since their album Domino, and that was Where I Can Be Your Friend. And that was on Tilbrook's well-reviewed 2nd solo album, Transatlantic Ping Pong, in 2004. Now, they worked with the music journalist Jim Drury on a retrospective Squeeze song by song in a book that they declared they'd become better friends since breaking up than they ever were when they were with Squeeze. Now, in 2004, The Great Show, Bands Reunited, the VH1 show, tried to reassemble them, the mid-'80s lineup, but it ended in failure. Now, Difford and Keith Wilkinson were both favorable to the idea. And Gilson Lavis expressed interest. Jules Holland felt he was too busy with his new projects, The Hootenanny Show. And Glenn Tilbrook, who was okay with it in the beginning, kind of rejected it. But their friendship continued. And Difford sat in on a few songs of Tilbrook's solo gig in December 2005. So they were getting much closer. So 2007, it was announced that they would reform Squeeze for a series of shows throughout the latter part of the year. And the rest is history. So their stylistically, Squeeze has been characterized as new wave, post-punk, pub rockers, power pop. They are one of the links between classic British guitar pop and post-punk, I think. They've also been labeled as punk and pop punk. Now, I don't think they like being thought of as a punk band, but they were influenced in that genre. That was the era they came from. Now, they were inspired and influenced by the Kinks and the Beatles. And they had mixed feelings about being compared to Lennon and McCartney. They thought that was the whammy. They also liked David Bowie, most of the members, and of course, King Crimson and Hendrix and all the real staples. Interestingly enough, during the days that they were broken up, Difford became a personal assistant to Brian Ferry, Roxy Music, and drove him around and created with him. And he has some stories about that. You'll have to buy the book. Now, what do I think of them? I love them. I personally love them. Now, with the new members, Stephen Lodge, a little different. Jules Holland was a honky-tonk kind of player. Hanson's a great drummer. Owen Biddle, backing vocal and bass, he came into the band about 5 years ago. And last year, Danica Dora joined. So their albums, the more modern albums, let's go from Cozy Fan Tutti Frutti, their second incarnation when they got back together. Okay. I thought that was a really good album. It was underproduced, I think. It was flawed, definitely, but it was worthwhile because the history and the dated production style hasn't aged well. Nothing from the 80s sounds very good right now. But you have a lot of crashing cymbals, crashing echo, and a lot of the 80s stuff. But Difford also talks about drink and violence and other emotional problems because he was a raging alcoholic who's been on the wagon now for quite a while. And there are some good songs there. King George Street, Last Time Forever is excellent. Heartbreaking World by Jules Holland. Difford and Holland wrote that. And it's an interesting mix. It certainly is. 2 years later, E.T. Thorngren produced the album with Glenn Tilbrook, the second album back. And Andy Metcalf joined the group. Gave them a little bit of a different sound. You have some good songs on there. Tough Love, The Prisoner. And it peaked at number 14 in the UK albums. But I think that's because everybody was happy they came back. Now, it was released in September 87. I saw them on that tour. Yep, I saw them at Madison Square Garden. And I believe either Susie Quattro or Susie and the Banshees opened up for them. I don't remember which one. But Hourglass was their biggest US hit. And it was an unexpected hit. It was number 15. And Difford attributed the video for making it what it was on MTV. It was played a lot. And when you're played a lot on MTV, you're getting a lot of exposure. Uh, you automatically think the song is great if they're playing it on MTV. So you think your album is great. And maybe it went to their head a little. Then they took a couple of years off. Every 2 years, they released Frank. Frank was interesting. It's a post-punk album. Um, it's like they relocated themselves in their delivery. They sound very youthful. They sound fun on this album. Um, it's very much more well crafted, I think, as a musician. I think it's more well crafted than the previous two. But interesting titles. They seem like they were all in a good place, but not quite as strong. Radio friendly, not quite as radio friendly. They came out with Play in 1991. Now, it's their ninth album. It was released on Reprise. Now, they only had 4 members here, and Steve Naive took the keyboard duties that would have gone to Jules Holland in the past. Steve Naive, or Naive, is Elvis Costello's longtime keyboard player. And during one of their incarnations, Elvis's drummer also was with them for a while. Now, I thought it was interesting. I like them, so you can't go by me. I thought it was their best post-reunion album. The Truth is a great song, and that's about alcoholism. And then you had Some Fantastic Place. Glenn Tilbrook's longtime love, teenager who was hanging out when they both got together, Difford and Tilbrook. She died of leukemia, I believe. And they weren't doing very well together, Chris and Glenn at that time. But Chris wrote the beautiful lyric about her, and it brought them back together. Pete Thomas was the drummer that was with Elvis Costello. He played on Some Fantastic Place. And Lavis left for a while. And there's some good stuff. Paul Carrick returned also. So now you had Paul Carrick, who had returned after 10 years, and new drummer and keyboard player. It's a pop rock style album. And it was recorded in Tilbrook's new personally built studio at his house. So the song structures and all that, a little more debated by Chris and Glenn, and they started not getting along again. Now, usually Glenn and Chris would write songs together rather than apart. But they wanted to revitalize their working relationship. And Some Fantastic Place, About Heaven, I think is one of their strongest songs. So A&M dropped them again because of Frank, the disappointment in 1989. Reprise took them for Play. But it was another failure, although Some Fantastic Place was a great song. Gilson Lavis had left the band. He was just tired of being in a band. He was still friends with them. And he had an alcohol problem too. He said he was fired from the band, Lavis, rather than leaving. He was kicked out after the American tour. He had just separated from his wife. He was not doing well. He had been sober for 7 years, and he thought having a drink would be a good idea, and it obviously wasn't. So then you go to albums like Ridiculous and Domino and Spot the Difference, Cradle to the Grave, and The Knowledge and Trixies, which has yet to come out. Ridiculous, they always have a good squeeze song on there. But there was a clear distinction with this album compared to Play in Some Fantastic Place. It was stripped down production wise. It gave her it gave it a crispier feel, uh, almost like Rubber Soul, but not. Um, it was interesting enough. Spot the Difference, of course, was the album where they first time in 12 years they had been in, and they had new members, Stephen Lodge and Simon Hansen. And John Bentley returned to the group after, I think, 28 years. And Paul Carrick did a guest spot on a keyboard remake of Tempted. They remade those songs so they could make money on them. Now, they never owned their copyrights because they were owned by a major record label. They thought it would be fun to re-record them and Spot the Difference straight on. You really get a better production value, but it's really almost note for note. And it was great. It was great. And it was packaged with a bonus live disc of Live at the Fillmore. So they really, yes, we did. Synth heavy in the 80s, yes, Zach. Very synth heavy in the 80s. Glenn Tilbrook, I saw up in Paulie, New York at Daryl's place. Daryl Hall is friends with Glenn, and it was cool. It was cool. Nice place. So Squeeze is a band that I don't feel ever got their just desserts. Why? I think lyrically they were a little too clever. I don't think the American audience, I don't think they were marketed well on MTV. They didn't quite have a great look. And on MTV, you were packaged by your look. And because they only had one standout song that made MTV, the video was very interesting. In fact, I think I can find it for you. It's a pretty interesting enough. No, Zach, no. Pretty interesting video. It was pretty good. But I think they are really entertaining. They played on the same stage that I did in Daytona. And I'll show you one of their real good live performances. I played on that. Just in my mind that everybody knows. Just say now that you down on a big mouth, I suppose. This was our secret. Our meetings are so discreet. Yeah, the voice like good book. I promise
keep it from the ears out on the street. Since I see it, we were happy affair. I could keep it down, the secrets everywhere. Just it over my mouth, now everybody knows. Just in I let you down, the big round, I suppose. Well, just running over, loosening the jaw. Just in over my mouth, it's not a secret
Okay,
anymore.
Zach. Thank you.
We had a secret, what a terrible thing to do. I couldn't keep it, I got so
Cool,
in
Colin.
love with you. Just you over my mouth, now everybody knows. Just and I let you down, the big mouth, I suppose. I need a gobstopper to keep my tractions, to get my nose clean.
Yeah, good rocking band. I've seen them probably 15 times. Synth heavy in the 80s, yeah. Everything was, that's why it didn't age well. From the Thompson twins to, Phil Collins, mic'd up drums and all that. Might as well have had the click track right on there so you could hear it. But Squeeze, I think underrated. I think misunderstood. Musicianship, I think Glenn Tilbrook's a very underrated guitarist. Jules Holland's a brilliant pianist. And Christopher gets by on the rhythm. Keith Wilkinson was a good bass player. Now the new incarnation with Stephen Lodge and the drummer, different sound, but they're still Squeeze. And in fact, they don't really do that song anymore live. But I could show you them now. This is just a guest performance.
I feel like I'm pounding on the big door. No one can hear me knocking.
That's it from Leon.
I feel like I'm falling back to the floor. No one can catch me from falling. Out loud since the more crazy sand. I watch it stop, no more turning it. The good of me, love the ship, the lights, no one is ending. No one on the TV set, back to the show, goes in the house, then goes out, all the lights are on, the lights are down. Take to the beach, no one on the TV set, back to the show, goes in the house.
And let's see if we can get you. This is last year. Here's Chris.
Since it comes from the rocks above the past, the covers take position in the pictures.
It's last year, I think.
She doesn't mind her language, it's a beauty she don't need. She listens to the old seats from the book, always asleep. Wants to find the fires dead and arrows entangled. I gave you what your buds are running, says it's good for pets, it's good for the swinging's doing
And the great hourglass.
Nowhere to go to get a gang of women to me.
I saw them in Atlantic City, I think the night before this with Boy George.
I feel like I'm pounding on.
Yeah, I saw them in Atlantic City. His voice is much like same key as Boy George. Not anymore. Boy George now is 2 octaves lower, but Boy George back then. Boy George was a better singer, but very similar to Boy George. I'll show you. Listen to the voice. Right. And listen to his voice.
I know all there is to know about the crying.
Close. Boy George was a better singer, better voice back then. I saw Boy George, like I said, with Culture Club. Although it wasn't, no, he wasn't with Culture Club. And about 2 nights before that Central Park concert. And Boy George is very low now. If you hear his voice now, I could show you what he sounds like now. Unbelievable. He's still great. Let me see if I could find you recently. Yeah, 2024. You hear his voice now.
Take control. Take control. I'm the boy.
Find a song for
We're dying soldiers. We don't dance for the love.
your voice. But heavy too. Wait,
You white boy, your life is love. You kiss and run and you.
but Boy George is still good. Voice is roughed up, but he's still good. I look like Freddy Krueger here. I'm just looking at this now. If you change the colors. So yes, I think that Squeeze was underrated. I think misunderstood as well. But they're the kind of band that you listen to them and you happen to hear them. Oh, that's them. One of those bands where they don't slip off the tip of your tongue very easily, but you're kind of glad they did. So, everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evening. And I hope you enjoyed. Hit the like button if you don't mind. And I will see you tomorrow.